What's up, guys? Joel VALLIE from Media Glitch here, and as you can see, we are not in the studio today. If you're a long-time viewer of the show, you know that we are actually a TV show first, a live TV show here in New Mexico, and then it gets cut up and it gets put on YouTube. And the other day we went in, we filmed a bunch of the Game On Expo stuff, and for some reason I cannot find the Meer, like the intro that we did introducing the clip. And I looked everywhere, but hey, either way, I'm gonna get it done, so I'm making it here at home. And what you guys are about to see is the panel that I did with Meer, who plays, well, Commander Shepard in the Mass Effect series. So, what an awesome guy. I got a chance, quite a few, we did 2 panels together. This is one, and then I'll release another one that we did with like Princess Zelda and the Walking Dead people. So, look forward to that. But right now, I just want to present to you the panel, the Meer panel. Enjoy.
How you guys doing today? I'm Joel VALLIE from Media Glitch, and well, we have an amazing panel for you today. Meer is internationally known in his role as Commander Shepard. You guys are awake, okay. In the Mass Effect trilogy. He also featured in the Dragon Age series from Bioware, as you know, and provides numerous voices for the Baldur's Gate series. And let's give a warm welcome applause for Meer right here, guys.
Hey, Joel.
Hey, man.
Good to see you, man.
Yeah, good to have you here, huh? Hey, let me get a little love.
Yeah, we'll get that going on.
Okay.
The handshake that becomes a hug.
Yes. I'm a huggy guy. So, you want to get that bad boy over here.
And hello, everyone. Thanks for coming. Good to see you. Hope you guys are enjoying the Game On Expo so far.
Come on, Shepard, everyone. Come on. Let's put it together for this guy. Come on. Wow. So let's start with breaking in stories, man.
Sure.
Tell us about how did you land your first voice acting gig?
Well, in the traditional way, which is I went to an audition and then they hired me. It was again, like often people come up to me and at panels and things like that. One of the main questions is, so how do you become a voice actor? How do you break into the voice business? And I'm probably the worst person to answer that question, because for me it was, I got an audition, I went to the audition, they liked it, I did the job, and then they just kept calling me and hiring me again. So that's I don't have the story of like, well, you got to do this, this, and this, and make sure to get your demo in this order and pound the pavement and whatnot. It was, I went to one audition and then they just kept hiring me. And this was back in the, I guess it would have been late 90s. And I was very lucky to get in on the ground floor with Bioware back when they were doing general auditions. So the audition that I went to was literally one of those cattle call auditions where it's just like, we want lots of actors to show up and we'll get you to do a bunch of voices. It was just held at a place called B Scene Studios in Edmonton, where I'm from and where Bioware is based. And B Scene was essentially this was again before Bioware had dedicated recording studios of their own and whatnot. And B Scene was like one of those places where you'd essentially go in and record you singing to a karaoke track. And so for that audition, we just had, a bunch of actors. You would just go in, sit in the waiting room, then go into the booth. They'd get you to do a bunch of voices. They would, ask you maybe can you do this accent? Can you do that accent? Can you try like an older voice, whatnot? So I just laid down a bunch of things. And I did get the gig, as I mentioned. That was for Baldur's Gate 2, which was my very first voice work for Bioware. I'd done voice stuff before. I'd done radio commercials and that kind of thing. I'd done stuff for CBC Radio, which is our national broadcast radio up in Canada. And I guess it's NPR would be your equivalent here, except CBC's better funded, I think. And, not much better funded, but still. Or we're like the equivalent of BBC in Britain. So essentially, I got the gig, and it was one line in Baldur's Gate 2, and this one line was in the final cutscene. So I was playing a cleric of Baal.
Can you do it?
Yes, I remember what it was. My one line in Baldur's Gate 2 in the final cutscene was, "There is no need for concern. The fate of this fool is sealed." And so it was basically, you'd completed the entire game, and then this was sort of like a little teaser at the end where it was all these evil priests of Baal sitting around a table with hoods and cloaks, and they're just, it's like, we'll get you next time, Gadget, essentially. And actually for that, again, it was early days. It was the late 90s. So they actually filmed me for that just on video camera. And so if you find that cutscene, I think it's on YouTube somewhere, it actually is the lower half of my face. Because of course, they digitally put in a hood and everything over top. But it's relatively primitive graphics, of course, but it is my face in the video game. So long before I was Shepard, when I was Shepard, it's not even my face in the game. So Baldur's Gate 2 is where you can see the lower half of my face in the video game. And as I mentioned,
how much of a role did you have in Baldur's Gate 2?
Oh well, like I said, it was that one line.
Oh, okay.
It was literally that.
Oh, gotcha.
And then for subsequently, they seemed to like that one line enough that I just kept getting these calls, and so I did the various Baldur's Gate supplements, Shadows of On. I did the Neverwinter Nights stuff, Hordes of the Underdark. And a lot of it back in those days, before Bioware had created their own IPs, they were doing all the Dungeons and Dragons stuff. So Neverwinter Nights, all that stuff, Baldur's Gate. It was all based on the TSR property, or was it? It might have been Wizards of the Coast already at that point. But essentially, all the Dungeons and Dragons properties. And I think it might not have just been the quality of my voice that they enjoyed. The fact is that I was a Dungeons and Dragons player. I was a dungeon master. I knew all the terms and stuff. So I think it was useful because I had a sort of shorthand with the writers. They knew they could bring me into the booth and say, okay, this guy is a 10th level paladin, and so I would just go, oh, then he's lawful good. Nice. Or, this is a kobold shaman, and I wouldn't go, what's a kobold, what's a shaman? And so I'd be, oh, well, they're lawful evil, and obviously he prays to the god of the kobolds, and, who is, I believe it's Kortelmek, if I'm recalling correctly.
So you got your nerd card for
I got my nerd card. I'm a card-carrying nerd. And so I think that really helped, because there's a lot of good actors in Edmonton, voice actors particularly. I worked with many of them. But the fact that I kind of knew Dungeons & Dragons inside out, that helped when I was doing the initial games and helped me form a relationship with them. And I pretty much worked on all subsequent Bioware games in some capacity. For example, on Knights of the Old Republic, I did a lot of the original Knights of the Old Republic. I did a lot of demo stuff. I was the demo version of Carthanasi, for example. And of course, Raphael Sabarge, who plays Caden in the Mass Effect trilogy, he ended up getting the gig as the Caden in-game. So when we were at DragonCon together on a panel, I joked that that's the reason I killed him on Vermar, is because he took that gig away from me. But no, I was never going to be like the final Carth. But I did a bunch of other stuff. I was a bunch of Imperial officers and things like that. And actually, I got complimented by Bioware because I think it was actually Lucasfilm was, of course, the one ultimately calling the shots on that. And they said, well, we want to all use actors from LA because I guess apparently they didn't have a lot of faith in Canadian actors. But I got told afterwards by some of the guys at Bioware, they were just like, they should have used you for the Imperials, man. It's like at least all Imperials have British accents. That's the way it goes. He said, I don't know, they just did American accents. You got to do a British accent when you're an Imperial, because as we know, British people are evil. No, I'm joking. My wife is British, I can say that. So I did KOTOR, I did, as I said, a lot of the Dungeons & Dragons games. Then when it came time to do Mass Effect, I actually was working on the project before I was cast as Shepard. Back in the early stages of Mass Effect, when it was still essentially just concept art and notes, and like no story had been written, they were just sort of figuring things out, like deciding the way that everything would look and sound. Because I'd worked with them a lot and had had this relationship, they got me to come in and essentially do a presentation to them on what I thought the baseline aliens should sound like what should a typical Solarian sound like, what should a typical Krogan sound like. So they gave me, it was great, like as a nerd, it was like really cool to be in on the very early stages of the game and like just be given this super confidential binder of stuff, like here's all the concept art, here's notes on their culture and whatnot. And some of the stuff was pretty obvious, like you take one look at the Krogan and it's like, I think they should have deep, gruff voices. It's like, that's kind of a no-brainer. But some stuff they took my notes on, like the Solarians. I always say that I'm the reason that Solarians sound like Steve Buscemi. Because I thought they should have that kind of cadence to their voice. That was my initial pitch, anyway. The Volus, why they have that sort of wheezy sound. Again, that's not brain surgery because they kind of wear something that looks like a gas mask and a breathing apparatus. So I think I was just like, yeah, you should probably incorporate like a wheeze into their speech patterns and the sort of the thing that they do. Some stuff they, for whatever reason. Well, actually, I know the reason for this. The Turians, when I was looking at the initial, like the structure of their faces and everything, I thought it might be interesting to have them have a sort of clicking sound when they talked. And so I'd done various examples of that. And ultimately, they didn't go with that because when I made the suggestion, Garrus wasn't actually, like, I don't think he'd been written yet. He wasn't like a main NPC. And so their thought was, if Garrus is going to be around a lot and like you're having a lot of dialogue and conversations and he's a love interest, like that clicking might be a little distracting, or it's just, eventually it'll just be like, oh, okay, we can't have that constantly. So they might, if there'd been a Volus party member, they might have done the same thing with them. But yeah, it was really cool. And then during that process, I'd done my presentation, I'd done like some demo stuff, and they actually, for the first E3 demo, they were getting me to do Shepard and a Solarian. And after I laid down the first just sort of demo track, I think it was Casey Hudson, who I'm very grateful to him. Casey, who was head of the project at the time, and Drew, actually. Drew was one of the head writers. They were listening and we really liked the quality of your voice. What would you think about auditioning to play the role of Shepard? I'm like, of course I'll audition. Like, we all know I'm not going to get it, and I'll just play a bunch of aliens. But they said, yeah, sure. So, they had me come in. I did an audition. They sent it off. Weeks went by, and I was still doing some other work on the game. And then I get a call. It's like, actually, you've made the callbacks. So we'd like you to, and I'm like, okay, fine, I'll do some callbacks, and then
always thinking you're probably
I'll never get it.
Right?
I'll never get it. And that's, I don't know. That's probably helped because I wasn't at all nervous. I was just like, well, there's no way in hell I'm going to get this, so I might as well, hey, I'll give it a shot, and then play some aliens. Then eventually I was told it's down to you and 2 guys from LA. And it's like, well, clearly one of the guys from LA will get it, and I'll play some aliens. And then I was told, you are Commander Shepard. We would like you to play Commander Shepard. I was blown away.
What was that phone call like?
I think I was actually told in person.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I came in for a session for something else, and they were like, we want you to be Shepard. And so I was thrilled, of course, to get to be Shepard and a bunch of aliens. So, yeah, that's how that.
So when you're like, and you're looking at this world, what were your first thoughts of this game? Like, because you're getting
that's the thing. It's not like they went, and here's all of Shepard's lines. They basically just told me, no, we want you to be Shepard.
Well, you knew the alien races.
I knew that there was going to be a game of massive scope, and of course I'd played like all the big Bioware RPGs before then, so I knew like just the size of KOTOR, it was going to be a big game. And in the initial stage, I think there were. Actually, yeah, I think there was some mention of it at the very beginning. They said, they said there's a possibility that we might want to do a sequel, and then later I was told it's like, oh, it looks like we're going to do a trilogy. But again, at the time it was just like, oh, this is a massive game. I wasn't thinking about there's going to be a lot of merchandise and people are going to love this and people are going to cosplay as this. I was just really thrilled to get to do a game of that scope and to get to be the lead in it. And I was always pretty sure that it was going to be a good game, just because Bioware makes good games. And quality is often leads to success, not always, but sometimes. Right. So I was like, this will probably be a quality product, and hopefully it will be successful. But I certainly wasn't prepared for the huge hit that it became. And again, I think it was the first time I was at a con and saw someone walk by dressed as Commander Shepard. And I wasn't even a guest at that point. I was just going to a con, because I'm a nerd. And then somebody walked by me dressed as Shepard, and I was like, okay, this is. I'd heard the game was well received. I'd heard it was successful, but it didn't really strike home until I was at a con and saw that guy spent a lot of time working on that costume, and it looks awesome, and it's my character. So.
Yeah, I mean, when you look out here and you see people with their
I'd see the end. Thanks for flying the colors, everybody. Appreciate that.
And we've even seen we were on the floor earlier today, and a girl over here, she came up to you. She's like, just telling you like how Mass Effect's changed people's lives. You know.
I hear that a lot, and it's always really gratifying to hear that because, again, it was when I met Seth Green, and oddly enough, we didn't meet through the game. We met after the fact, socially,
right.
just because we were both friends with Nathan Fillion,
Okay.
and I was in LA with my wife, and he invited us out to the same thing that he invited Seth to. So, again, like when I met Seth, it was like, we've actually worked together. Hello, nice to meet you.
Oh, nice.
And so we started talking about Mass Effect, and Seth has been involved in
Crazy nerd card. On
yeah,
that one.
exactly.
Yeah.
He's one of the people in the world with maybe the highest level of nerd cred, and he's been a Family Guy and Robot Chicken, of course, and Buffy. But he said that, and he's done a lot of games as well. But he said he's never encountered a video game that where fans connected so much with it. And I think there's various reasons for that. I mean, the fact that Mass Effect was like the first game. You had lots of RPGs before that, but Mass Effect was the first RPG where you had a voiced protagonist. And so rather than reading blocks of text, you could just watch it. Like, if you weren't playing, say your spouse or your partner was playing, the other person could sit down and just watch it like it was a movie.
Yeah.
And the fact that there was, like, again, it all comes down to the writing. There was great relationships. People got really invested in the characters. And that, I think, is one of the reasons why it became because it reached the fans emotionally, and people cared about what happened to the characters, and they were invested in the relationships that their Shepard had with the various party members and whatnot. And so yeah, I think that's one of the reasons for its success, and why, even though it's like, 5 years since the last game came out, people are still really invested in Mass Effect.
Did you prefer Renegade or Paragon dialogue options?
You mean when I was recording?
Yeah.
Well, when recording it, you have to give the same weight to both branches.
Right.
So obviously.
But did you have a favorite?
Well, when I played Renegade first. But I often do that. Like any game that gives you, it's not strictly good, evil in Mass Effect. It's sort of like, are you polite or are you an asshole? But you're saving the galaxy both ways. But games like KOTOR or like Fable or Fallout, where there's some kind of morality system, I usually do my evil playthrough first, and then when I do my good playthrough, I feel like I'm redeeming myself for being such a jerk the first time through. It's like, oh yes, well, the first time through I blew up Megaton to get a nice apartment, but this time maybe I won't murder a bunch of people so that I get a nice address. And yeah, so it was the same with Mass Effect. When I played it, I did my Renegade playthrough first, and then my Paragon. But when recording it, of course, you have to give equal weight.
Exactly.
Because they're both, you don't know which way the player is going to go. That said, the Renegade interrupts are super fun, and the Renegade version probably has the best one-liners and the best snarky comments and whatnot. Although that was actually a line that we had to walk, both Jennifer Hale and I, when we were recording it, because people also aren't necessarily going to do a pure Paragon or a pure Renegade playthrough. They might be jumping back and forth. And so that was actually a line that we had to walk, because after a few sessions, we had to do some re-recording of dialogue because our sort of emotional choices, or at least in my case, my emotional choices, they said were too strong going Paragon. Because if you were going back and forth, it would sound like Shepard was having like wild mood swings,
right.
Where it's like, get the hell out of here. Oh, hello, good to see you. And so,
bipolar,
so it was sort of like, well, we gotta sort of balance it out, maybe flatten things out a little bit between the Renegade and Paragon choices, so that you don't sound like you're
right.
Yeah, you're having those wild. And one of the things that they did is just like, and this was a very valid point from the director, is that, well, Shepard is a military, a commander, obviously, and used to giving orders under fire, and so even if they're really mad, they're not necessarily going to be like, I'll kill you. It'd be more like, I'll kill you. Yeah. So yeah, that was the line that we had to run. And then, like, as the games progressed, and just as a function of the plot, like by 3, they were letting me loosen up and show a little more emotion, because they're like, okay, well, the reasoning here is that Shepard has been, ground down by the events of the previous games, and like this is the culmination. So yeah, I think I personally felt that like my performance struck the best balance probably in 3.
It must be insane when you have all these ways you can go and different things, like as a director of a video game, just trying to make sure everything kind of.
I mean, we really relied, speaking personally, I certainly relied on my directors because it's not like we ever get, here's the entire script, read through it. It would always be, walking in, you almost never in video games get your lines ahead of time, like for various reasons. Because like sometimes the script might be being written that night before you're in the booth. Sometimes it's just a matter of being confidential. They don't want any chance of the script getting out or whatnot. So a lot of the time when you go in, you're doing what amounts to a cold read, as we say in the biz, where it's like, here's your lines, you're seeing them as you're recording them. You'll get a few takes, but it's not like you had the previous couple of nights to learn your lines and then prepare them and think about the various ways that you might approach it. So you really rely on your director not only to give you a direction of emotional intensity or whatnot, but also just to give you context, because you're also doing stuff completely out of order, and you might be doing stuff from the middle of the game before you do stuff, the early stuff, and like because they might be writing this, they might have like the plot all blocked out, but they're writing specific dialogue. The dialogue for that scene might not be written.
Saying that's why I think voice actors need to get way more credit than they do because.
Well, also, as I say, our directors should get a lot of the credit too.
But when you're doing a movie, you got the whole script. You kind of know what's going on. You can prepare. You can study. You can do all this, draw inspirations from things. Yours like, here's page 15.
Yeah. Exactly.
Oh my gosh, I am so sorry.
Oh, that's right. That's great.
That just happened, huh?
Yeah. That's
okay, my bad.
Answer it. Martin Sheen's on the horn. And yes, it's very true that the director they would also
and the voice actor.
Yes, and the voice actor.
Time.
But without them telling us, we wouldn't. They'd be able to say, okay, this is after this has happened. This is after, and we might go back and say, okay, remember that scene that we did like 2 weeks ago? This scene immediately follows that scene. And so, yeah, they're really, we'd be at sea without them.
You always hear, though, like actors going, well, the reason why the stiff performance is because all we had was a green screen. And you...
That's the name of the
game.
game.
You're in a booth, man. And
you're doing it all with your imagination.
And you're still making it, like, hit the heart, with the dialogue, And speaking about that, I have to ask this because... Mass Effect, the Mass Effect series is a series that moves people so much. And then we get to Andromeda, and I gotta just talk about this. What are your thoughts on Andromeda?
Well, I haven't finished Andromeda yet, but I have started playing it. For me, it's kind of...
You don't have to answer if you can.
For me, it's kind of cool because I'm playing a Mass Effect game where I don't know everything that's going to happen.
Oh yeah, that's for sure.
And in previous panels, I've made the joke that, like, for me, playing Mass Effect is kind of like being Dr. Manhattan. I know everything that's going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
It's like I come to a situation. It's like I know every way this could possibly play out. And it's not like I have a photographic memory or anything, but as I'd start a mission, it's just like, oh, it's this one. Okay, I remember this. Oh yeah, I know everything that can possibly happen.
But you ever like, oh, I better not do that because I know what happens over
there.
Yeah.
Well, I guess if there's like dire consequences. Then...
Well, because I know like a lot of people didn't feel that connection because of some of the graphics and stuff like that, and I was just wondering if you.
I mean, personally, I didn't. I'm friends with the folks at Bioware, and I know that Andromeda was primarily the Montreal guys, as opposed to like all the Edmonton guys that I'd worked with on the trilogy. But again, I am, as I say, I'm just happy to be playing a Mass Effect game where it's like I don't know what's going to happen next. It's kind of fun.
Do you ever see yourself replaying the role as Shepard in the future?
Well, I mean, that would obviously be BioWare's call, but
you would
it's not like I turned them down if they called me up. I totally understand artistically why they did that, and it's sometimes good to have endings where it's like finite. There's closure. There can be other games set in that universe, but artistically speaking, it's sometimes good for things to end and for. I guess the comparison would be like, say, in comic books, sometimes a limited series, like, say, Watchmen, where it's got a definite beginning, middle, and end, you can explore themes and narratively, you can tell a satisfying story that resolves itself, as opposed to, say, an ongoing monthly where it's just like, well, we all know that any change that happens will get undone.
Exactly.
We know that there are no actual consequences, even death. Even
That's
if
the biggest one for me right there.
If there's death, they'll come back. If their arm gets cut off, they'll grow it back by next week. So yeah, in that sense, I'm totally supportive of BioWare's decision to say the trilogy was Shepard's story, and now any future Mass Effect stuff is going to be something else.
And when you
But again, like I said, if they wanted to do another Shepard game, I would be there.
call him up. He's there. You know. Now, do you have a favorite line from the Mass Effect series?
Okay.
And
Well,
can you do it?
Well, often,
for-
and I write this on things that people get me to sign, of course, is the Shepard catchphrase, which wasn't really designed to be a catchphrase, but became one, which is, "I should go." And there's variants on that, like, "I have to get going. I should be going now." But "I should go," yeah, that sort of rose to the top. And to give BioWare their due, they could have paid Jennifer and I to say that once each, and then just reused it every time. But no, every time we said "I should go," it was a fresh take, and it was rooted in the scene that it appeared in. And of course, I do have another catchphrase which isn't even in the game. And I actually have Manslayer to thank for that, of Gamer Poop. And that line is, of course, "Well, bang, okay?" and I write that on Mass Effect merchandise as much as anything that is actually in the game. I was a fan of Manslayer and Gamer Poop before they actually did any Mass Effect. And like when the first Mass Effect one hit, I was really excited. It's like, oh, they did a Gamer Poop of Mass Effect, fantastic! I was, hilarious results. And subsequently, I think he's probably done like about 8 or 9 different Mass Effect ones. I think I actually even do a little vocal cameo in the one that they did for Andromeda. Yeah, there's some sort of.
Oh, yeah, I think
they walk up to a panel and
Yeah.
you hear Shepard's like, "Hello, is this the future?" "Well, bang, okay." Something about telling all the MILFs in the galaxy I'm coming. Or, something like that.
That's awesome.
And so yeah, that was a lot of fun. Other favorite lines. Well, I think if people have played the Citadel DLC, that is my favorite DLC on the Citadel, and. It's great. Like it's just got so much fan service and in jokes and things that pay off. Of course, they've got like the meeting of Shepard and Blasto, and I did the voice of Blasto and all the other Hanar. And Blasto sort of again was supposed to be a little Easter egg joke that developed a life of his own, and there was Dark Horse did a Blasto comic one shot, I think, and there's tons of Blasto fan art and whatnot. And so that scene where Shepard sort of walks onto the set of a Blasto movie and comes face to lack of face with Blasto, that was really fun. And also there's a Vorcha in that scene, and I do all the Vorcha, so I was actually playing all 3 characters in that scene. So that was a lot of fun. And in Citadel, the line "the best" that Shepard delivers, that was a lot of fun. Citadel as a whole was kind of, in some ways, emotional because we knew it was the very last Mass Effect thing that we were doing. And when we were recording the 3rd game, a lot of us did interviews, and they were saying, this is the end of a long journey, a multi-year journey. It must be very emotional to reach the end. But all of us knew that there was still DLC coming. Like there was Leviathan and Citadel and the other Mass Effect 3 DLC. So for us, it was like, I guess it's kind of the end, but we know we're going to be working on this for another year still. But with Citadel, we knew that it was truly the end of the road. So that one was more emotional.
Right, I bet.
And I think "the best" is one of the, if not the last, one of the last lines that I recorded. That was also, somebody asked Shepard, how was it? And he turns and says "the best." That was kind of referring to the entire process, the entire thing of being Commander Shepard.
A heavy line right there.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, and as far as scenes go throughout the trilogy, the death, Anderson's death scene where he and Shepard are just looking over Earth and looking over the battle, and they're both essentially dying. That was a very emotional scene, and I was lucky enough that Keith David had already recorded his lines, so
you had something to work
I
off of.
had him in
Nice.
my headset, so I had his performance. We weren't in the same room, but I had his performance in my headset, and that was.
Which is usually the case, right? You guys are never together.
Yeah, very rarely, very rare. And even if you are together, they're probably not recording you together. Like I think some of the guys in LA talked about how they'd go in and do their session, and then they'd come out in the waiting room, and Seth Green would be there, and like, hey, I'm going in for mine.
All right.
And I did get to watch Martin Sheen's recording. I happened to be in LA at the time, and they got me to do a session. And then they just told me, it's like, oh, and by the way, Martin Sheen is coming in tomorrow. You want to come to the studio and, you could meet him and watch him do his session? I was like, oh, yes, of course,
Who doesn't
please.
want to meet Martin Sheen, right?
Yeah, and he was great. He was very nice, very friendly man, and he was totally cool with us sitting in. Jennifer Hale actually came in that day too, so we both got to meet him, and we basically watched him record the Elusive Man's death scene. And so they have the glass. We were sitting in the room with the sound engineers, and Martin knew that we were watching. So he was doing the Elusive Man's death scene, and just at a dramatic moment, he sort of paused and then just turned to the glass and went, "The horror, the horror," and we were thrilled because he did an Apocalypse Now reference, and it wasn't even his line. That was Marlon Brando's line.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Yeah, and that's awesome, man. I can't even imagine being a part of that.
Yeah,
that
it
moment.
It was a lot of fun.
That's like film history right there.
It was like, it's Martin Sheen.
That's crazy. And then
The best fictional president the United States ever had. Yeah.
And so a couple more questions, and then we'll open it up to the audience. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing now. You had a game, The Long Dark, come out.
Yes, the current game that I'm working on is called The Long Dark, and it's from Hinterland Studio. It was about, I think, 3 years ago. It actually was funded on Kickstarter. And it did great. It did very well on Kickstarter, and that enabled us to put out a full-fledged game. And so we've been working on it for, again, about 3 years. It's been out in sort of alpha. The sandbox version has been out in alpha on Steam for a couple of years. But they just did the launch, the full-fledged launch of the story mode, which is the narrative mode, and they released it on Xbox One, PS4, and Steam on August 1st, so just a couple of weeks ago.
So check that out for sure.
And it's a survival game. It's a very realistic post-apocalypse survival game, but so there's no mutants or zombies or anything. The concept is that there was a geomagnetic event that knocked out all power on Earth, so there's no electricity on Earth anymore. And the main character that I play is a bush pilot who was in the air above northern Canada when it happened, and there's this weird aurora borealis effect that then the plane obviously crashes. And it's basically you waking up and having to deal with now I have to keep from freezing to death, from starving, from dehydration, and there's wolves trying to eat me. So in the sandbox, the whole point was just stay alive for as long as you can.
Right.
And so you're doing things like melting snow for water, and then learning how to build snares and catching rabbits, and eventually there are some guns in the game, but ammo is incredibly rare. So you're mostly raiding cabins for I found a can of beans. There's a can of soda. Expired aspirin. So it's really hard. It's actually super difficult. But there were people that got good enough that in the sandbox mode, there was one guy that lived over a year in game.
No way.
Yeah, and I think he's probably dead by now because that was months
like-
ago. But now with the narrative mode, there's an actual sort of story and an outline and objectives and things to do. And Jennifer Hale is actually in the game as well. So this was great because Jennifer and I have known each other for years now, and we didn't meet during the game. We met at a con. Just after Mass Effect 2 came out. So again, it wasn't directly through the game is how we met. But now Jennifer and I, she plays another character in the game, and it's sort of a shifting perspective. If you guys have ever played the Telltale Walking Dead games, so sometimes you're in control of my character, sometimes you're in control of hers, and they're also releasing it in seasons and episodes.
Okay.
So season 1 is what we're working on right now, and they've at game release, I think they released the first 2 chapters of the narrative, and there's going to be 5 chapters total, I think, in season 1, and so they'll be rolling them out over the next while. I think if I remember what Hinterland said, I think that they're aiming for the last chapter to basically be released sometime in 2018.
Nice.
And so it's really nice to actually get to do scenes with Jennifer, because up until now, we've been the same person. So everybody else in Mass Effect I get to do scenes with, and Jennifer is the one person, you know, we're both essentially the face of Mass Effect, but we've never, our characters have never interacted. So that was really fun
pretty cool.
to actually get to do scenes with her. And as I say, the perspective and who you're controlling will sort of depend on as the story progresses. And in sandbox mode, it was more like Mass Effect, where you could essentially, will I be the male played by me or the female played by Jennifer? And now we actually, and our characters are actually divorced. We're like a couple that used to be married, and now we're divorced. She's a doctor, and we were actually both in the plane when it goes down, because she needed a favor, and I got to get up north, and so you crash together, and then you wake up, and you're not sure where she is. But I'll let you play the rest of the game to discover that.
That sounds good.
Although it's funny, one thing that I've often said, maybe it'll eventually happen if I keep saying it. With the Citadel DLC, of course, there's the storyline with spoilers for anyone who knows. It's been out for years, so I think we're fine. The Citadel DLC, of course, has the storyline with the evil clone of Shepard. And so when I first went, and again, like you don't get advanced knowledge of this. Like we went into the booth, and they said, okay, well here's the thing. There's the storyline. It's an evil clone of Shepard, blah blah. And so I'm in the booth, and I'm like talking to my director, and one of the other writers was there, and I was like, oh man, this would be such a great opportunity. What if Cerberus switched the X and Y chromosome on the clone, so that if you're playing a male Shepard, you fight a female evil clone, and if you're playing the female Shepard, you fight a male evil clone, and then Jennifer and I could get to do scenes together. And they're like, yeah, well, it's too late now, so just record with you guys. But I put out this call. If anybody has good editing skills and a YouTube channel, somebody edit that so that it's the two Shepards facing off again, because all the tools are there. You've got all the dialogue talking to each other. So do it so that either way, so whether it's the evil male facing the good female or the good male facing the evil female, somebody please edit together Shepard versus Shepard from the Citadel, male Shepard versus
This will be
Fem
on
Shepard.
YouTube, so...
Okay. Oh, good. Okay, so
someone's
please.
responding.
Please, someone. I'm asking for your help, Internet. You're my only hope.
Someone's doing that. So, man, time goes fast, so I wanna open it up for questions. I do have more questions, but I'd rather hear from you guys. So if anyone has a question out there, you got one?
Yeah, I just want to ask, what is exactly the true ending of Mass Effect 3 in your eyes, and do you believe in indoctrination theory?
Well, now I'm aware of indoctrination theory. I've been made aware of it. And of course, like people were asking me, it's like, so is indoctrination theory true? I'm like, what's indoctrination theory? And then I'd read it and go, this makes sense. Maybe it is true. Maybe Bioware's just not telling me either. Because it was a very well thought out theory, and it's just like, wow, that would have been if they were playing that kind of long game, it's like that would be really interesting. But wow, that would take a lot of foresight and planning. But I never had a problem with the initial ending. But of course, I'm willing to concede that, of course, I was privy to a lot of inside information, and I knew things that people weren't clear about. At the end, a lot of complaints or any issues that people had were often about the clarity of the ending or the emotional closure that they were looking for with these characters that they'd really come to know and love. So I, for example, knew that the intention wasn't that all Mass Effect relays are destroyed forever, everywhere through the galaxy. I knew that they didn't intend that the Normandy is stuck on that planet and Garrus and Tali are going to starve because they can't eat any of the food. So yeah, I knew that wasn't the thing, and Bioware was going for a more, again, it's sort of more artsy, abstract ending, almost like a 2001 style, draw your own conclusions thing. And not everyone was satisfied with that. As I said, clarity seemed to be an issue, and again, the emotional closure. And I think that Bioware did a really good job of addressing those issues, I think, with the clarity issue with the extended cut. And clearing up, it's like, okay, this is what happens to your beloved characters. This is how things shape up. And I think the emotional closure was really addressed with the Citadel DLC. So in some ways, I consider Citadel to be, again, it was one of the last things we did and the last thing released. But again, it really delivered on the emotional closure, especially the big party. My friend Kathleen Rootsart, she was one of the real champions of, we've got to let them have a party where they get to say goodbye to everybody, where you got everybody together. And it also gave such a great opportunity for example, you get to see Rex and Grunt in the same room interacting with Zaid, for example. Or, you know, the characters like Rex and Grunt in the main game, they're never together. But you get to see them, you know, getting drunk together, essentially. Before the extended cut came out, my favorite ending was Destroy, mostly because I think I was talking to some of you guys earlier about that, but because, you know, there's the potential that Shepard might be alive. You get to see the inhalation of the chest with the N7 on it, so that was my favorite pick. But after the extended ending, I really liked the Control ending, and not just because Jennifer and I were the ones that got to do the voiceover for that ending. Also just because, as I said before, Shepard became Galactus, essentially. As I think I was mentioning before, not everyone knows there's a distinct flavor to when Shepard becomes a Reaper in the Control ending. Depending on whether you were a Paragon or a Renegade. The Paragon version, it seems a lot more benevolent, and it's just like, okay, well, things will probably work out okay, and Shepard will just be this sort of benevolent deity watching over humanity. But the Renegade version is a little more ominous. It's sort of like, oh yeah, he might get corrupted by power. Who knows?
Awesome. We'll go over here. I'll get you next.
Hey, Donnie.
So, I know you said on the Destroy, you know, you see Shepard's chest plate move, him breathing. At the very end of the game, with Stargazer and the child, he says, you know, can you tell me one more story about the Shepard? Okay, one more, my sweet. Does that leave a door open to have maybe not like the Reaper saga, but like a different Shepard story come out someday?
Well,
like
see, I mean, it certainly sounds that way. I mean, if I actually knew anything about that, I couldn't tell you guys. But because I don't know anything, I'm free to speculate. I mean, that was essentially probably BioWare's way of hedging their bets. And it's just like, if we want to do another Shepard game, maybe we can put that out there. I mean, you probably know that it's the grandpa in that scene is Buzz Aldrin. Yes, which is pretty cool. And I didn't get to meet him, sadly. I was like one day too late or early, I think, in LA to actually get to meet Buzz Aldrin. But I think it's pretty cool that we had his voice in the game.
So on the same thing, sort of follow up, how much platinum do we have to mine, or who do we have to, you know, go with fortune we have to kidnap? We have such a violate that happens.
I don't know. I guess it's like BioWare's going to do. You know, they're certainly responsive to their fans, as we saw by them releasing like the extended ending as free DLC. But I don't know. I guess if people keep saying, "Hey, we'd like a Shepard game," that's cool. It's like, you know, or try to get the Vorcha in any future
send
games.
those tweets out, man.
Yeah, I'm sorry, there was no Vorcha in the Andromeda Galaxy, sadly. Although I should tell you, I think I can, and in fact I checked if I could say this before I came. I actually am in the Andromeda DLC, the multiplayer DLC. I play the Batarian. So if you want to play me in Mass Effect Andromeda, just play a Batarian in multiplayer.
There you go.
Right there.
So this is not as much Mass Effect, but it is still BioWare, and I don't know how much information you give. Anthem, are you in it? Are you voice acting? Do you know anything?
Well, I don't know if I can talk about Anthem because it's very early stages for Anthem. Like, you guys have all seen the E3 demo of Anthem, right? Yeah.
Oh, we don't want to get nothing.
Yeah. So Anthem is one of those where it's like I think a lot of what I know about Anthem is currently covered by NDAs. So I couldn't possibly say. Although a few people have, I think this is public knowledge, so I think I can say that I did a little bit of work on the demo, but that doesn't mean that means nothing. That doesn't mean I'll be in the game. You know, I did a lot. I played Morton in one of the Mass Effect 3 E3 demos, and I wasn't playing him in the game. So yeah, it's I can't really talk about Anthem because it is in the early gestation of that project.
Too early for that one.
But I can say it's called Anthem now instead of Dylan because that's out. Yeah, I don't know if you guys know, but Dylan for a long time was the code name for Anthem before they revealed the name this year at E3.
All right. Right. A little bit of no, but like even though you said like you'd be totally down if Bioware calls you up to play Shepard again, how would you feel like since Telltale kind of teamed up with I forget Gearbox to do like Tales from the Borderland? How would you feel like if they did like a prequel like Shepard game or like
I'd be thrilled.
Like a bridge between Mass Effect 2 and Mass Effect 3 while he's like in prison and everything? Like,
She's got it all written out already.
Yes, please pitch that project, make it happen.
like choose your own like dialogue.
Right.
Yeah, I was a big fan of all the Telltale stuff. I really liked Wolf Among Us, the Walking Dead games, of course, and those games are great, especially because they're not. They're almost entirely dialogue and character relationship and narrative, and I love those, especially for like I fly to Europe occasionally, so having a Telltale game along with me is great. It's just interactive movie essentially.
Who else? I seen right there.
Alright, so you said that you were God and you knew everything that was going to happen as Commander Shepard. So when you played Commander Shepard, who were your romantic choices, the official one?
And well, actually, yeah, that actually played into my romantic choices because I had inside information. So, Effect 1, for example, my Renegade romanced Ashley and my Paragon romanced Liara. However, when Mass Effect 2 came around, I had the inside knowledge that neither of those characters were going to be squad characters. They were both going to sort of make appearances, but they wouldn't actually be with you. So I switched my romantic allegiances. So my Paragon then switched over to dating, who was I? Oh, Liara. And then my Renegade was with Miranda. But again, that was completely influenced by the fact that I knew that the other two characters weren't going to be around. And so I probably should do a playthrough where I, stick with my love interest all the way through all three games. Because there are differences. Like if you switch back and forth between romantic partners, there are differences in the dialogue and your relationship with those characters. So yeah, I'd be interested to see a playthrough where Shepard actually manages to remain faithful.
It was cool, you were dead.
Well,
Right there.
Do you have a favorite alien race?
I do. I like the Solarians, of course, because again, in a sense, because I worked on a lot of them early on, I do have a connection to all the alien races. And when I was playing, I tended to favor the non-human squad mates. Like all the humans was this, like, hey, see you on the ship, guys. With the obvious exceptions of the humans I was dating. But yeah, I mean, I'm all of the Vorcha, so the Vorcha have a place in my heart certainly, and the Hanar because I'm all of them. But I guess it's hard to pick because like Blasto is a Hanar, but then again I've actually cosplayed as a Vorcha, so and I've got this excellent Vorcha silicone mask that was made for me by some guys down in Louisiana called Composite Effects. And they do fantastic work. They custom made me a mask that's actually, they scanned my head, the whole bit, made me this awesome Vorcha mask that would probably have cost thousands of dollars if I'd commissioned them to do it, but then they just gave it to me for free. So those guys are good eggs. Ooh.
Sorry, I'm just.
Is that Martin Sheen again?
No, that's just telling us we're
getting close.
we're
getting
close to time. So, is there another question out there?
You got some questions? We got 3 up in the front row.
We'll get her since she hasn't had one yet.
So you've got a lot of the nerd cred, you play a lot of games. What's the guilty pleasure game?
Well, at this stage,
One that like embarrasses you a little bit, or like.
I don't know if I play any games that embarrass me per se. Usually, like, I'll be honest. At this stage, Fallout 4 is probably a guilty pleasure, and I'm guilty only because of the amount of hours I've sunk into that game. Because I'm not exaggerating. It's over 1,000.
Oh my
And
God.
I didn't. Yeah. It's like I've played for over a month of real time. And most of that, I finished, the actual quest, like the storyline. Almost all of it has been settlement building. And then once I started, they had mods on the Xbox, then that brought me back in, and I probably sunk another couple of 100 hours into it. And actually there have been quite a few mods. One that just, I hadn't played Fallout 4 in months, and then I heard about this mod and I had to play it. It's actually a quest mod called America Rising, which is a Enclave mod. And it's really well done. It's professional quality voice acting, just great new assets. There's an oil rig that the Enclave is based on. It actually begins with, you find out that Vault 111 had a secret government installation inside of it. So inside Vault 111, there's a bunch of like American military officials from before the war that have been frozen, and scientists. And basically, you kind of have to be doing an evil playthrough to make this make sense, because you essentially, in this mod, you just go, all right, the Enclave, and you're totally on the Enclave side and fighting against. So especially if you're allied with the Brotherhood, don't play this mod, because you're killing Brotherhood soldiers a lot. But the Enclave, they show up, and like once they actually activate all their stuff, they've got like all of them have perfect XO1 armor. They have, so it's a fun mod, and they did have an evil character, so why not?
So we'll close it out with one more question. One more? Sorry, man, I gotta pick a guy who hasn't done it yet. Go ahead, right there in the back.
So, overall, Paragon or Renegade?
We already asked that, didn't we?
Paragade. Renegade. Yeah, it's hard to pick. As I say, I do my Renegade first, and let's face it, Renegade probably has the best one-liners and whatnot, but he is a bit of a jerk. He's a bit of a jerk. So yeah.
All right, shoot, go ahead.
If you were to pick any like game or universe you would pick up, what would you be? For example, like Halo or any other game you could be in as well.
What
You mean
franchise?
beyond Mass Effect?
Like if you were like in a mashup between if you were Commander Shepard appeared in another game, like.
Oh wow. Well, I'm a big comic book fan, so I'd probably say Marvel Universe, and also then I could show up in an MCU movie.
That'd be awesome. Well, awesome, man.
I'm a DC fan too, though, so yeah, they want Commander Shepard in the next Wonder Woman. I hear Steve Trevor's dead, so.
That's awesome. Can we give a round of applause for Mark Meer?
Thanks a lot, guys.